Good afternoon and welcome to Steve's Civil War Adventures. Today I'm at Darrow's Lane in Cresaptown, Maryland, which formerly was the route to Brady. It was a ford, a B&O rail station, and it was the crossing for many activities conducted by McNeill's Rangers when entering Allegheny County. The Rangers first utilized the crossing after the events at Folks Mill in August of 1864, where they intended to disrupt traffic along the nearby Cumberland and Cresaptown Road by destroying 6 culverts. This was mentioned in the reports of Benjamin F. Kelley, who was the general and then the commander in charge of the Department of Cumberland at that time. But there's more to that story. McNeill's Rangers captured General Kelley in February 1865, 159 years ago from the day, to be exact. And how that got started is that the wish to kidnap General Kelley began with Captain John H. McNeill, the father of Lieutenant Jesse McNeill, over the imprisonment of his wife, daughter, and 4-year-old son, who were arrested during a visit to West Virginia and then detained at Camp Chase in Ohio. McNeill was killed in late 1864, and the responsibility of this plan to capture Kelley fell to his son, Jesse. Sometime in the later part of 1864, Jesse McNeill had sustained a leg injury, and that laid him up for a few weeks, which gave him time to devise his plan on how to go about capturing General Kelley. To get started, he first sent a gentleman by the name of John G. Lynn, Jr., a Cumberland resident, on furlough to return home in nearby Cumberland to assess the situation and report back to him. Unfortunately, on February 5th, 1865, Lynn was captured and detained as a guerrilla, being sent to Fort McHenry with the intent of not being exchanged for the duration of the war. With this setback, it did not deter the young Lieutenant Jesse McNeill, who moved forward with his plans by sending John B. Fay and then a private Richie Haller, a young Missourian, across the Potomac to take and scout to locate the enemy and provide intel to McNeill for his plan. Where Lynn failed, Haller and Fay succeeded. On February 19th, Fay had sent Haller to meet with McNeill and his men near the poorhouse in Hampshire County, West Virginia. During this meeting, Haller exchanged a letter and information with McNeill, letting him know that everything was good to proceed. From there, McNeill and his men proceeded the next day to a house 5 miles from Romney, and they met with Fay. And that was on February 20th. That was on February 20th that they set out from the Vance Hernet House, continued over Knobley Mountain, the mountain range to my left, stopping at a house across the Potomac to refill, while a small part of McNeill's party continued on across to the Brady house, where they warmed themselves by the fire and refilled their canteens with apple Brady. Now, the small party with McNeill had a discussion on what the plans were, because as they crossed, they came within earshot of a Union picket and was concerned about their plans being disrupted. So the group voted against McNeill, who wanted to capture the picket, and decided to proceed as planned. From there, they left once all parties were across the Potomac on the Maryland side at Brady, and they took and came out what was the Brady Road, now Darrow's Lane, to the Cumberland and Cresaptown Road, and headed east to Cumberland, where they encountered the picket post. Now, this can be followed along thanks to the largest open-air museum in the country dedicated to the American Civil War. Civil War Trails. As you can see behind me, there is the information here on Brady's Crossing. So if you're here, stop by and check it out. You can get the Civil War Trails app on your phone, download it, and then it will take you from the first point of information on McNeill's Range to the second point, where we'll pick up the rest of this story about what occurred at the outer picket post as we continue on with the 159th anniversary of the capture of Generals Crook and Kelley by McNeill's Rangers. It was near this area around 3 a.m. in the morning whenever McNeill's Rangers encountered the outer picket line of the Union defenses for the city of Cumberland. These pickets were Ohio volunteers and of German descent. So these individuals spoke broken English, and it was only under the threat of physical harm as the Rangers threatened to hang the pickets where the call sign Bull's Gap was extracted. Now with this information, McNeill continued on eastward into Cumberland to our next stop, the inner perimeter defenses located at Green and Fayette Street. Right now we're following in the footsteps of Jesse McNeill and his Rangers. After overcoming the outer defense pickets, they could continue on this way into Green Street in Cumberland. Now this has since changed since 1865, with the addition of a roundabout, the construction of Interstate I-68, as well as stoplights. So this would have been a very cold, blustery morning with some flurries, and this would have been a dirt road at the time instead of the macadam surface as it is today. So as we just left, the first picket post, we are slowly but surely coming up onto the location of the second pickets, or the inner defenses, in an area of Cumberland known as the Dingle. Now this is where the Cumberland Crescenttown Road comes in to meet Green Street as well as Fayette Street. And it was here around 3:20 to 3:30 in the morning when McNeill's Rangers overtook the second picket post, capturing the pickets, putting them on their horses, and they continued on down Green Street like we're about to do. So behind me, you can see Baltimore Street, which currently is under construction right now as they work to make improvements to the city of Cumberland. In 1976, the city took and closed to two-way traffic the street behind me, and are now opening it back up to one-way of traffic with an anticipated completion later on this year. So it's going to make it a little bit difficult getting to the Belvedere House, but we should be able to get to the Riv House site. Picking up with Loudermilk in the history of Cumberland, the party then rode rapidly along the road to Green Street, down Green Street, and then leisurely across the bridge. Now at the time, instead of the bridge being concrete, the bridge was a metal wire, like chain link bridge that spanned both sides of Wills Creek. Then from there, they continued on at a leisurely pace from what you can see about to where the excavator is there, and that's where the parties of McNeill's Rangers separated. The first group tasked with capturing General Cook at the Belvedere House, and the second group continuing on up to the Riv House for the capture of General Kelley. The third part, under Fay, the same Fay that came to Cumberland to scout and perform the reconnaissance, went to the military telegraph office and destroyed the telegraph while all this was going on in the early morning hours. So we're here now at the site of the former Riv House, which was turned into a parking lot in the 70s. This here is one of the commemorative markers placed by the city of Cumberland at the site, talking about the capture of General Kelley, February 21st through 22nd, 1865. Adjacent to it is the Civil War Trails marker covering the information of the events. This is the third and final Civil War Trails marker on the events in 1865. Having succeeded in capturing both generals and a brief stop to pick up a few additional horses, including Philippi, the horse belonging to General Benjamin Kelley, McNeill's Rangers continued to Canal Street. From there, they got on the C&O Canal Path, which is along the hillside there, and continued to Wiley Ford, West Virginia. As they approached Wiley Ford, a cannon shot was heard coming from in town, sounding the alarm that the generals had been captured as McNeill and his Rangers entered West Virginia. Soon after, in pursuit of McNeill, was Union cavalry, which followed them to Romney, West Virginia, where a brief skirmish between part of McNeill's party occurred so that McNeill and some of his men could escape with the generals. They took old mountain trails and paths to get to Moorefield, and from there, the generals were delivered to Richmond.